Hey everyone, welcome to our webinar. Really excited for you guys to be joining us today. Today we're going to be presenting on new and next in digital advertising for both 2018, kind of a recap, and then also what's to come in 2019. Really excited to be presenting with Google today. We have some great insights, a great partnership with them, and really are looking forward to sharing some of those trends that we are seeing. Before we get started, just wanted to introduce a few housekeeping items. We will be recording today's webinar and we'll be sending that out afterwards. And then we will also be answering questions at the end, so feel free to submit them throughout the presentation, and then we'll get to those right at the end. Wanted to introduce Alex. Alex is one of our partners at Google who has been working really hard to really develop where we're going as an agency, but also keep us informed of what's new and next, helps us with all the beta tests that we're putting out in the market, and has been a great strategic partner.
Hi everyone, as Haley mentioned, I apologize in advance for this halo-looking light on top of my head. I can't seem to make it, but I'll be sure to jump off video as soon as we get into the deck. But yeah, as Haley mentioned, Converge has been a great partner of ours for the past few years, and I've been working with them for the past 6 months. And just to give a little bit of a quick background, the Google Agency Partnership Program works with our top 5% of agency partners who have promoted best practices, demonstrated good growth over the course of the past few years. So it's been a pleasure working with them on betas, optimizations, and as mentioned beforehand, just overall growth opportunities. So looking forward to running through this deck with you. I do work as an agency development manager here at Google, been here for 5 years. And as you can see from the slides here, my expertise is full funnel campaign management. So we'll be getting into that today.
Thank you, Alex. And everyone, I'm Haley Warwick. I'm our digital marketing principal here at Converge. I've been in digital marketing for about 10 years, the last 5 years specifically in higher ed at Converge. So really work with our team to ensure that we're kind of bringing everything that's new and next to our clients, really enhancing our strategy to really look at how we effectively use digital marketing for recruitment efforts, and then work closely with a lot of our agency partners, such as Alex, with Google, to make sure that we're on the forefront of what's up and coming with digital marketing. So again, thank you guys for joining us today, and we'll go ahead and get started. So today what we'll be covering is kind of what's new currently in digital marketing for higher education. So really recapping some really great trends that we've seen over 2018. We're going to talk a little bit about what's next, up and coming, things to be thinking about as you're planning for the next year, and what's trending now, and kind of a 2019 checklist. If you're like us, December is somewhat of a bit of a downtime, so we like to use this month to definitely plan ahead for the next year and kind of make those next steps for really launching some new efforts starting in January. So let's start with what's new, 2018 highlight reel for advertisers. So a big thing that we saw with kind of trends in higher education digital marketing was big data integration. We're seeing more and more schools being more savvy with their CRMs and understanding the impact of integrating all of their systems to understand how users are first engaging and how they're matriculating throughout the process. So connecting with your landing pages, your website to CRM to really understand that path of engagement has been super important. And we're seeing more and more functions and advances in a lot of CRM systems to ensure that there are capabilities to ensure that you are tracking there. We're also seeing a lot with machine learning. So what we're seeing there is really that enhanced optimization effort. So if you are kind of a one-man show, you know that optimizing those campaigns is definitely time-consuming. More and more platforms are introducing capabilities to really emphasize machine learning and use that automation to increase performance based on how ads are performing, how audiences are engaging, and really taking off that optimization work off your plate. And then more and more with full funnel. Most platforms have really enhanced what they're doing from an attribution standpoint. We know some of the DCM platforms are really looking at what we're doing with impression tracking to really understand both how users are first clicking on an ad, but before that, what they're seeing, so we can connect the dots throughout their decision-making process. You know, Google's been making a ton of updates with attribution as well.
And just to chime in here, Haley, this is, again, Alex from the Google side. I think this is extremely important in this conversation, specifically in the EDU space, across all three of these bullet points. You know, we talk about big data integration, and Haley mentioned CRM platforms. We on the Google end are working with our agencies, especially with, again, the EDU space, to change the conversation and take it beyond just cost per lead and really tying that back to a cost per enrollment strategy, right? So looking at this big picture to understand that online to offline integration and what that connection looks like. As we move into machine learning for optimal ad creative, I think just to kind of counter that on the Google end, for example, and this is truly happening across all platforms now, we've introduced something called responsive search ads. We'll get into that a little bit later on, but why this applies to colleges and universities is because if you think about it, different students are reacting to different messaging very differently, right? And this is what machine learning is all taking into consideration. And lastly, on the attribution side, I'm sure this is a hot topic that a lot of you have been thinking about, but specifically in the EDU space, year over year, brand queries have been declining. This year over year, it's down 4%. And we've seen that as a constant pattern over the past few years. And I think why that's so important is to really understand how non-brand and upper funnel keywords are playing into those enrollments offline. And that's something that, you know, we do have top of mind for this year and obviously kind of moving into the next year too.
Another big trend that we saw throughout 2018 was the increased use in carousel advertising. So a lot of the social platforms have introduced this and really emphasized the use of this. And why we like it so much is it really creates an interactive ad experience. There's this huge trend in just kind of that swiping technology and kind of interactiveness with ads. And we see that it's a great way to break up the monotony in newsfeed. So as users are scrolling, it encourages engagement throughout their newsfeed to kind of scroll through and look at the different information in ads. How we've been using this is really emphasizing top value propositions. So really emphasizing different points that really kind of set your program or your school apart. So it's a great way to leverage additional copy, get in front of the users with more information. We've also seen a lot of clients really leveraging this for testimonials. So telling those student stories throughout different ads, and then with some of our clients that maybe have smaller budgets and we're looking at a more holistic kind of brand approach, really showcasing the different program options. So lots of things you can do with carousel ads, really prominent on Instagram and Facebook. But LinkedIn also introduced this in the last few months as well. So if you haven't been on LinkedIn for a while, definitely check that out. It's been a great tool that we've really seen increased engagement on. Speaking of LinkedIn, so LinkedIn has made a lot of headway in the last year to really enhance what they're doing. From an advertising perspective, we've seen increased use both from the advertising side as well as the user side, and increased capabilities on what they're featuring as far as advertising options. So great ways to both engage and convert your audiences. InMail has made quite a big move this last year with really leveraging, changing up the frequency of when users can receive emails. They used to only be able to receive them every 60 days, so it was hard to get in front of them, but they've recently reduced that to looking at just a 30-day window. So now more advertisers can get in front of their audiences. We find this a great strategy to get in front of audiences in a more personalized way, tell them a little bit more about your program, kind of call out a specific action. And when comparing this to some of the sponsored content advertising capabilities, we really see this be a lot more cost effective. So definitely worth testing out if you haven't explored LinkedIn for a while. Also doing a lot with lead gen campaigns. So if you guys aren't familiar, this is that concept where while a user is browsing on a LinkedIn specifically platform throughout their newsfeed, that instead of being directed to a landing page from an ad, they can fill out an inquiry form right on the platform. So it alleviates that extra step a user would take. So we've seen our cost per lead sometimes reduced by half, and really seen some increased engagement. How we're using this the most is really that kind of initial request more information, but also leveraging any downloadable content that would be a quick ask from a prospective student. And LinkedIn is continuing to introduce capabilities to integrate directly with CRMs as well. Definitely seeing some increased capabilities with search. I'll let Alex talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I think this has been, a topic of conversation that is still relatively new. And the reason we wanted to include this in here is because we've seen a trend, and it's only continuing to pick up in the voice search space. In the US alone, within the Google app on Androids, 20% of all queries now are made by voice. So as we start to move into 2019, and even as you start to think about your strategies moving forward, whether it be on the search side or even just across the board in terms of your overall experiences and your voice apps, this is definitely a strategy that you want to start thinking about to adapt to that new method of search, right? It's not like the typical signing into your computer, going to google.com and actually typing it out. Voice search has really evolved where Google is still working on a narrative and understanding what those best practices are using our data internally, but that's definitely something that we'll want to be on the lookout moving forward. I'd say one of the biggest advancements as well on the search side has been the capability to incorporate audiences on the search side. Beforehand, a lot of our audience strategies, which include in-market audiences, which just to kind of explain it a little bit more in depth, we've got signals, and this is across platform, but as we talk about it in the Google lens on the search end, we've got signals to help us understand which users are actively searching and researching, in your case, EDU institutions, where they should be going for undergrad, where they should be going for their postgrad degrees. And these are all signals that we're taking internally that beforehand were really only available on upper funnel initiatives, like our display campaigns and even more for awareness on the YouTube side. So where we've come today is being able to leverage these audience insights back onto the search end of things. So when you are looking at your search campaigns and bidding towards keywords, you do now have the ability to bid up on users or to really zero in on users who we know are actively shopping for your services. And then I'd say lastly, the new format on the creative excellence side. This has been a piece that we've been really focusing on for our clients for the past year or two, to be completely frank. I think we've had the traditional text ad in the past that wasn't necessarily evolved for the increase in mobile devices. So over the past year, we've introduced expanded text ads, which essentially open up opportunity to maximize your real estate on the Google search homepage. And in addition to that, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but these responsive ads that we've come out with recently, they're leveraging machine learning to pretty much create all of the ad copy for you based on confines that you've dictated, but using machine learning to understand which ad copy will resonate and convert for specific users, better than your traditional search text ads that you're used to beforehand. And then lastly, we'll get to this at the end of the presentation as well, but we have introduced the functionality for getting leads or generating leads directly from Google search ads themselves. So without any clicks through the landing page, you now have the capability to collect lead forms, whether it be name, email, zip code, directly from the ad itself.
Also seeing a continued trend in increased use in video. I think we've all noticed this throughout the last few years, but this year especially, we've seen a huge increase in the vertical video storytelling as well as just overall usage in the platforms. So some trends that we're seeing is really leveraging video as the new testimonial. So instead of looking at testimonials in the written format, schools are really using the video to really tell those client stories or those student stories. Throughout both the newsfeed, leveraging video on landing pages, we're really seeing an increased use in this. Also seeing more and more increased use in in-feed video advertising. I think you guys will notice this introduced in the LinkedIn platform, seeing more video use there. And then again, that vertical video storytelling. So we've seen Snapchat continue to be a top performer for some of our traditional undergrad programs that we're working with. And then with the increased use in Instagram stories, we're starting to see more and more advertisers really leverage this platform as a way to get in front of their audiences with short snippets of information. So calling out those key components of the program that we would be interested in, and then also, again, telling those student stories. Also looking at great YouTube strategies. So kind of early days with our agency using YouTube, we really leverage this as an awareness tactic, trying to get in front of audiences that we thought would be interested in the program. YouTube's made some great updates with really leveraging different components such as calls to action, getting in front of more granular audiences with targeting capabilities. So we're really looking at this as kind of a full strategy where we can introduce different video assets to different points of the funnel based on user engagement. We're looking at some of those short videos to really build that initial awareness, so those bumper ads, to really get in front of them with quick bits of information. But then looking at those longer form emotive videos to get in front of audiences who have already engaged with us. So leveraging retargeting segments as well as prospective student lists to tell a little bit more information to keep our program or the schools top of mind as they're continuing throughout their decision-making process. And because Google is always continuing to advance what they're doing from a targeting perspective, YouTube's able to leverage all of those same targeting capabilities. So we can look at both contextual advertising, so getting in front of users who are browsing relevant content or channels that we select, but then also looking at behavioral targeting, so looking at users who have indicated that they're kind of in the market for higher education just through browsing and search patterns. So a lot of different things that you can do. I'd highly encourage you to check out YouTube strategies and some of those targeting options to see what might align with your goals and audiences. So now let's talk about what's next, what's up and coming for 2019. We really like this quote. Big data is not a strategy, it's just a lot of data. Automation is not a strategy, it's just a process done by a machine. Hyper-personalization is not a strategy, it can be creepy. Content is not a strategy, it is everything. Social media is not a strategy, it is all media. Innovation is not a strategy, it is a fancy word for new ideas. And bots are not a strategy, it's a software that runs automated tasks. So in other words, a strategy is not about big words, it's not about the trends that you're seeing in social media, it's all about choices. We know that we just introduced quite a variety of things and we're going to continue to give you snippets of some new trends that we're seeing. But really, when defining your strategy, you really need to look at who is your target audience and what are your goals. And then it's about making choices based on those two components. So with that said, we want to kind of start with what we feel like is a good approach with how you kind of start developing a strategy and deciding what type of tactics maybe are right for your audience. So first, we start off, who are we trying to reach? And for most of you, that's either traditional students, graduate candidates, executives, sometimes parents, influencers, and decision makers. And with that in mind, we know that the options are endless. We know that there are always going to be priorities. So to really understand ROI, you have to at first identify who you're trying to reach. How we do that with our clients is really just trying to understand and build target audiences based on both anecdotal data from admissions, even your students, and then both actually hard data, so looking at the trends that we're seeing from demographics. So we really want to look at the characters who represent your key audiences. I think if you work specifically in programs or very involved with your student body, you know who some of those students are, and really thinking through leveraging what we know about them to identify more similar audiences. This really allows you to drive kind of a roadmap to how you want to both get in front of this audience and then drive content to resonate with them. We really think that both qualitative and data to kind of really drive these personas is a must. We want to know what the user's goals are, as well as maybe what some of their challenges are to really focus on messaging. But we want to understand their background to really figure out who we can get in front of to find similar audiences as well. What this really lends itself well into is really kind of telling more of that student-centric messaging. So we really think that, you know, once you have defined those personas, it's a great strategy to kind of think through, all right, who are my target audiences? How can I reach them? But then how can I get in front of them with messaging that's really going to resonate with them? We think leveraging testimonials and stories to bring some of these points to life. So you can see some examples here of really getting in front of what we think are similar audiences with kind of showcasing representation of maybe your current students. And then also thinking about where users are at in their journey. We know that some channels are great for building awareness, but then some channels are great for just really taking that getting that user to take that next step and maybe attend an event or apply to your program. Really think through ongoing developments in social media that one thing that we do see something that schools struggle with is really just that creative selection. So if you're short on imagery, what we really suggest is really looking at some ways to enhance your current photography. So really looking at more of those design components that you can leverage on. We've seen a big trend with advertisers moving away from just static imagery to feature more imagery that has design elements, calling out additional taglines, testimonials, program names to really catch the user's attention. And then also seeing a lot with kind of more frequent updates to messaging. A lot of social platforms have a lot of kind of a fatigue effect. So once users see an ad, they might start to ignore that as they browse out throughout kind of the upcoming months. So it's great to ensure that you're continuing to update your creative and messaging as well. So another thing to think about is where your prospects spend time online. We know that looking at all the different options and all the new trends and all the new platforms that prospects are engaging with, that there's a million different options. So we know that a lot of users are spending time on the social media platforms, but that video is also a key driver of where users are spending their time as well. Something we always want to think through is what strategies make sense for your different goals and what channels should you focus on based on even the recruitment cycle. Starting with awareness, we really see a great way to leverage display, some of the Gmail capabilities, social media and YouTube strategies. So if you're really looking to build awareness for your programs or your school, or introduce maybe a new program, some of these tactics that are more cost effective and can leverage more data to reach that initial audience to build awareness are great. And then for programs where maybe you're a little bit more focused on users who have a lot more intent, or we want to get in front of your existing audience, looking at different tactics such as search engine advertising or retargeting can be great. And we included YouTube here as kind of a side note that because of all the advancements Google's been making with their platforms, YouTube can be a great strategy in both aspects. So building awareness, but also continuing to get in front of the audience. Over here you can see we included some initial data, benchmark data on what we're seeing as far as different cost per lead data. So something to kind of think through is when in relation to budget and goals, being mindful of the trends that we're seeing with these different strategies. So a lot of times what we're seeing from an awareness standpoint is lower cost per leads due to less competition and lower cost to entry for some of these channels. However, we do see lower kind of lead to enrollment rates. So being mindful of that. Sometimes it's worth to spend kind of pace out your budget to really understand how you can allocate more to the interest and consideration tactics like search and retargeting, because typically we do see more higher lead to enrollment rates there. And then you need to think about how to measure success. So with any tactics, it's important that you understand kind of those KPIs that are most important to both align with your goals, but to align with the channels and what they're able to offer. So that might be you're trying to get more visibility, so you're looking at impressions. Maybe you're trying to just build more engagement on your social media channels, so you're getting more clicks and likes. And then maybe you're just trying to drive traffic and get more engagement on your website. There's a variety of things, and different channels allow you to really hone in on those different tactics. So for example, this is working with Michigan State with their Broad College of Business. We know that based on their goals, they're kind of trying to reach users throughout the entire decision-making process. So you'll see here on the left, we're using YouTube to really get in front of users initially to build awareness with a bumper ad. We're then thinking through how do we get in front of users now that we've built interest who are specifically searching for a full-time MBA program. So we're leveraging search to make sure that if users are searching that way, we're getting in front of them with an ad that incentivizes them to take the next step to learn more. Once they engage, we really want to continue to get in front of them with next step messaging. So a common next step for some of these programs might be to attend an upcoming event or webinar. So we'll leverage retargeting tactics to be mindful of that audience and getting in front of them to keep them engaged. And then we're also using different tactics to really get in front of users who are ready to take that next step and apply. So promoting deadlines to current prospect lists, utilizing their email. So you can see there's a variety of strategies. A lot of times it makes sense to kind of leverage all of these throughout the recruitment cycle, but to really understand what are the top priorities for that point in time. Another way to kind of think through measuring ROI and aligning that with your goals is really figuring out how to best report on those KPIs. At Converge, we are using Data Studio for our clients as a way to aggregate all of our campaign data. And it's actually a free tool, and if you haven't checked it out, I would highly encourage you to do that. We are using it to, again, aggregate all data, but to also understand how we can look at things at a more holistic view, both by multiple programs, time, see those trends month over month to make sure that we are seeing ongoing improvement. We'll look at leads to really understand how we look at that compared to the budget and really understand, okay, well, maybe we're spending more on this channel and our cost per lead is a little higher, but we can see kind of further down the funnel that that tactic is yielding the highest lead to enrollment rate. So this data can be very beneficial for making some of those ongoing decisions and assessing ROI overall. It's great for trying to, again, break down performance by channel, getting down to even ad format performance insights to really understand what messaging and creative is resonating with your audience. And you can really look at a lot of custom report opportunities just based on your goals. But I highly encourage you guys to check out Google Data Studio. It just came out of beta, so it's definitely a great thing to think through if you do struggle with kind of consolidated reporting. And kind of finally some quick ROI tips as you're kind of thinking through planning for next year. We really feel like it's very important to start with thinking through who your target audience is and how you keep them top of mind with everything you do. So initially, we'll always work with our clients to develop personas, but we want to continue to tweak those based on the insights. So depending on your recruitment cycle, it's a great, this might be a great time to kind of think through, all right, I have a new cohort that I'm going to be trying to promote. Let me take my learnings from last year and really assess our current student population to see if we really need to think through any major changes that we've seen. But it's good to refresh that on an annual basis. We also suggest not jumping to the latest trend just to do it. However, we do want to be cognizant that, you know, new strategies are always great to test out, but really think through, again, who your target audience is, what are your goals, and if that strategy makes the best sense to align there. And we also encourage you to hone in on the metrics that are specific to your strategy. So again, if you're building awareness, there might be some different KPIs that you really want to focus on, such as impressions, clicks, website engagement. But if you're really looking to drive qualified leads and enrollments, it's really looking at both that lead data, registration for events, and enrollment data. And then lastly, track the user journey beyond just the content you post. A lot of times we know that there's that scroll trend where people do engage, but they might not take that next step action. It's important to really align all of your efforts to better understand how users are first initially engaging and maybe inquiring, but then what do they do after that, and how do you continue to assess those opportunities to engage that audience further through your advertising and also internal marketing efforts. So trending now, the next frontier. Some things that we're seeing now that are newly introduced on different platforms are a few things with LinkedIn. So they recently introduced dynamic ads, and you can see here an example of that where you can really look at leveraging custom ads to really speak to that specific user as they're browsing online. So it could be quick snippets of information. They have some templates predetermined in the LinkedIn platform, but we've seen some great initial traction there. We've seen the best use is kind of that next step with leveraging downloadable content. So I encourage you guys to check that out. Again, if you haven't been on LinkedIn for a little bit, it's a new tactic they've introduced. And they've also recently introduced sponsored content videos. So that has been in beta testing, I think, for about a little over a year. Rolled this out, I believe, or maybe late spring to all advertisers. But if you guys have been on LinkedIn lately, you've probably seen the increased use of video, but you probably are seeing it more and more with advertisers too. So again, similar to YouTube strategies, it's great for awareness, but can be great for building momentum further down the funnel as well. With Facebook advertising, they're definitely making a ton of updates. You guys have probably noticed their in-stream video section when you're in the Facebook platform on your mobile device. They are really promoting the use of video. It's really trending to really segment that video out into that separate component on Facebook. I'm starting to see more both in-stream ads and ads as you browse through. So we'll continue to see that trend, I'm sure, continue to progress throughout this upcoming year. And I believe Facebook is definitely starting to make a lot of shifts more towards video. They've recently introduced Facebook story ads to complement the story feature that they've gained momentum on. So similar to Instagram advertising with the story ads and Snapchat, getting in front of users with those quick snippets of information with the vertical video format. We're also seeing a lot of advanced location-based strategies. We recently partnered with a company called Toro, and I think at this point, everyone's probably a little bit familiar with geofencing and IP targeting capabilities, so really leveraging both the user's physical location or the Wi-Fi that they're connected to. But looking at Toro, what's different about them is we're able to geoframe specific locations and then continue to advertise to that user past the point of time where they're still in that location. So instead of just only being able to reach that user when they're in a specific location, we can then continue to retarget them as they're browsing online outside of that location. So it's great for leveraging, especially if there's big events and there's a great market that you want to ensure that you stay in front of throughout the upcoming months to think through that. But highly suggest and happy to provide some information. They have a great self-serve platform that we're utilizing for some of our clients, but have seen some great initial success here. And then there's a ton of new and next channels to explore. Some of these aren't necessarily new as far as just pure audience use, but definitely a little newer to the advertising world or introducing new capabilities. So Spotify has a self-serve platform. Used to just have to work through a vendor, so definitely encourage you guys to check out capabilities there. Pandora continues to make updates to audience targeting capabilities. Twitch is a platform where all younger kids are spending time and have recently introduced some advertising components as well. We're seeing a lot of opportunities with Reddit and Quora for a lot of niche programs where we know that audiences are spending time communicating to each other, asking each other questions about very niche topics that we've found able to leverage for a few programs. Pinterest has made a ton of updates in the last year. I just had a call with our rep last week to kind of think through how to leverage some of the new tactics with how they're able to target users, some of the creative that they're introducing. And then Twitter continues to make updates as well to make sure that they're staying on the forefront and keep up to speed with all the advances that Instagram, Facebook, and Snapchat are making. So highly encourage you guys to check these out. I think we always suggest allocating a small portion of your budget to test out some of these new channels to see if any tactics make sense for your specific programs or initiatives. So yeah, highly encourage you to check these out. We also have quite a few blogs that kind of elaborate more into the detail of the capabilities of these platforms as well. And I'm going to kick it out to Alex to really talk through what we're seeing as far as kind of ongoing use in video and some trends that we're seeing in Google as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Haley. And at this point, all the participants must be thinking that Google guy must be, so sloppy. He's got YouTube on both ends of the funnel, from upper funnel, he's got it on lower funnel. He's got newspaper clippings in here from 2017. What's going on? But I'm going to have to defend myself and say that this was all intentional. I know that this section is in the next frontier section, but truthfully, I want to talk about how this is really become the now frontier. We've all heard about the gradual shift from, TV over to digital. We definitely see the value of TV here at Google, but now I think it's more important than ever to craft a strategy, to complement what you're running on the TV side, if you do have a traditional presence, onto the digital platform. There's several, OTT platforms out there and streaming services, but today I'll be discussing YouTube a little bit more in depth. So if we go to the next slide, we'll start by zooming out just a bit and really discuss how things are rapidly changing. According to eMarketer, just to put a few statistics out there, Google's very data-driven, so I do apologize in advance. There's going to be a lot of data and statistics coming up. Please bear with me. 73%, again, according to eMarketer, of internet traffic was video in 2016. 73%. That number is going to climb to 82% by 2021. It's crazy to think that we're already in, coming up on 2019, and 2021 is only a few years away. And why are we seeing those numbers? I think the reason is because, humans are wired to absorb and respond to stories. And I think it's the sight, the sound and the motion of video that's incredibly, effective storytelling. And on the next slide, I'm actually going to prove it to you. If you take a look here, I was trying to make this a little bit more interactive. Couldn't really figure out how to do so. But I found that this stat to be mind-boggling. Video consumption is pretty much already taking over our daily life. The only two other activities that Americans do more than watching video per day are sleep and work. Just take a second to think about that. It's really amazing how, again, humans today are consuming content and the amount of time that they're actively engaged watching video cross-platform. And today I really wanted to zero in. We showed those opening slides about the shift over from TV to digital. It's happening on a broad scope, but who are the ones that are really moving over and where is that impact? I would argue that the answer is your target market. And what we're going to call them today is the unreachables. So who are the unreachables? A report came out from Omnicom Group last year, and they coined this phrase of unreachables. And it's this certain audience segment, the unreachable segment that, I guess to kind of read the quote specifically, it's the growing audience of millennials and Gen Xers who aren't tracked, and therefore they can't be targeted or measured by today's standard of TV and video measurement. And I think that's why it's extremely important, last year, but especially now, to start talking about how to complement that strategy, how to complement that measure of all the video assets that you have available to you, whether you have been on traditional platforms or not, and how that's going to pan out. And just to define millennials and Gen Xers, I'm part of that, and I used to be on the lower end of things, but I'm moving over to the older side of the millennial spectrum. But that's anyone between 21 and 53. So if we go to the next slide, that broad range is really kind of captured, I think, with some of the data that you'll see here. 47% of that 21 to 53-year-old demo are watching zero content, no content on traditional TV platforms. And to dive a little bit deeper into these numbers, 66%, 2/3 of the unreachable's TV and video consumption isn't captured by those measurement platforms. We've seen a drop of about 30% in time that millennials actually spend with traditional TV, and this has been pretty constant over the past 6 years. And then 1 out of 3 households do not have a cable or satellite subscription number. So those cord cutters too, those are ones that are going to be in market and part of your target demo that we need to start talking about, again, a consolidated approach to say, hey, we need to be on traditional platforms, we are spending here, but at the same time, where else can we look for this? And if we go to the next slide, you'll see a few of those OTT and streaming services that we talked about. These numbers have grown since last year. I guess I will take a step back. I haven't found the updated numbers for 2018, and I apologize for that. These numbers are from 2017 from an eMarketer report. But overall, 3 in 4 millennials are using streaming services, period, right? And, you've got the Hulus of the world, you've got the Prime Video on Amazon, you've got Netflix, and then you also have YouTube, which has been, the number 1 platform that is visited by millennials today. And just as a side note, we talked earlier about, bottom funnel and search engine marketing. I did want to make a disclaimer and a side note that YouTube is actually the 2nd largest search engine in the world as well, behind Google. So the takeaway here is that, again, we're moving over to the OTT and digital platforms and streaming services, and we're going to zero in on this YouTube audience of 185 million in 2017 that continues to grow. Just a few more data points here to really hammer this home is, we want to make sure that we are understanding that the audience does live here and that they are engaged. YouTube has 1.9 billion global users, especially in the EDU space where you are attracting international students from all over. I think that reach number is extremely important to look at. And from an activity perspective, we actually have 1.5 billion people logged in and coming to YouTube every single month. So it's not a one and done, but it has been a platform that has seen a lot of return visitors. And I think on the flip side, when we talk about engagement and watch time, especially for millennials and Gen Xers, it's all about mobile, right? The mobile conversation was 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Have a good M site, make sure that you're loading quickly on mobile screens. But now users are spending over an hour a day watching YouTube on their mobile devices alone. And again, this data is from 2017, so this has been updated to see a little bit further of an increase in engagement for 2018. And why are we talking about this today, in an EDU seminar and an EDU webinar? Is because we are telling you that your institution should be collaborating on this platform where learning is truly an endemic trait and it's not just a trend that's kind of come and go. 78% of Americans 18 and over go to YouTube looking specifically for education content. YouTube watch time for study skills has increased by over 80% year over year. And just to contextualize this, there are 500 million views of learning-related content on YouTube every single day. And 1 million of those views are actually shared every day. And I think that goes back to that whole conversation, again, of millennials and Gen Xers, how we've become a generation of sharing and engagement and, I guess, making things cool, right? So we want to make sure that your brand is staying ahead of the curve, where, again, there's several platforms that we can be looking at, but YouTube is a really great place to understand that your audience is living. So recently, we've opened up our targeting capabilities and our measurement opportunities to several more signals that we'll get into in a bit. But I think the most important takeaway here is that we're connecting with these millennials, this unreachable group, across all screens. And I think this is really the differentiator when you can really start to, one differentiator that you can tap into. I guess the way that I view this is more about understanding or seeing this as more of a scalpel versus a hammer and zeroing in specifically on that target market that you want to get to. And we talked a little bit earlier about contextual targeting. And while that's extremely important still, right? We talked about learning content and creative on the YouTube platform. But the conversation that Google is having as a whole with our top agencies, with our top partners, and our top clients is moving away or I guess complementing that strategy about understanding what context looks like, but more importantly, understanding who you're going after and what your user's about, right? And that goes across many different demo sectors, including age, including gender. But what's most important and what the key takeaway I think for today is it's important to know what they want in that specific moment. When we go to the next slide, for the first time on YouTube, this was pretty much introduced this year. These are high-level targeting capabilities, but advertisers are now able to use people's cross-screen intent data from Google Search, from Google Maps, across the 7 different properties that we have with over 1 billion users worldwide, again, to reach the right users at the right time. And I think this does create new ways to find people based on their interests. So for example, you can now target people who have an affinity for TED Talks, or you could target people based on where they're at in their life. Did they just get married? Did they just graduate from undergrad? These are the improvements that we've made to our audience strategies that will allow you to take your targeting and to take your conversation a further step forward. And I'd say on a high level, I really like this quote. I didn't put the quote here, but Larry Light was the former CMO of McDonald's. And the quote says, "It no longer makes economic sense to send an advertising message to the many in hopes of persuading the few." And where that comes to fruition, again, with the YouTube platform, where we have decided that this unreachable audience is living and engaging and sharing all the content that they have, is to the point where you can now leverage, again, these bottom funnel hyper-targeted strategies that Google has and other platforms have as well to speak specifically to the right people, again, at the right time with the right message. And we've put in a few examples here of some of the modern integrations and some of the updates that we've had on the YouTube side specifically. The one I'm most excited about and the one that I have seen extreme success with in 2018, this was actually rolled out towards the middle of 2018. But for the first time, you can reach people that are actively researching on Google. So google.com as a search platform to target them back on the YouTube side. So if you think about this contextually, if someone's on Google, during their journey to find their next institution or to look for a business school near them, within the past 7 days, if a user has searched for best business school, apply to a specific business school, you're able to take that specific cookie now and target that onto a YouTube platform with highly engaging and, as Haley mentioned before, emotive content. Moving forward, I guess across the funnel, a lot of these targeting platforms have been available and they've been perfected across platform. But we want to talk about the ability to target people that have already engaged with your business, online or offline, but didn't actually convert. So they didn't submit that application form. They didn't generate interest. That we can do that through remarketing and customer match, which is uploading all of the first-party data that you have into our system. And then the last one I quickly want to jump into is similar audiences. Similar audiences is where you have the ability to find people that are similar to your best customers or your strongest potential customers. And in your case, that's going to be students. So whether that's you uploading your CRM data of past students and their profiles, or uploading information about what your students look like, that we have the capability of tying those personas and those IDs to similar candidates who share similar data, digital tendencies to them. And then lastly, I think on that piece beforehand, I apologize, I quickly wanted to talk about this too. We had a whole conversation about, television and the cord cutters and how that is the millennials and the Gen Xers. We just introduced this past quarter the ability to target cord cutters or light TV viewers. So again, when we think about reaching the right person, across both television and your digital strategies, that's how you want to think about the complementing factors here. And then just to wrap it up, I wanted to showcase a specific example, going back to that funnel again, where we talked about YouTube has been always known or considered as this awareness play, right? Upper funnel, it's been great for driving recognition or ad recall, so on and so forth. But we've spent a very specific focus understanding, again, the trends in the video space, moving away from TV, moving away from offline, I guess moving away from daily activities as demonstrated by that sleep and eat narrative, over to understanding, or at least trying to figure out how YouTube can be leveraged as a performance funnel to actually drive leads. And one of these integrations that we've just recently come out with, and it's actually only available to our agency partners now, again, Converge is one of those, we do have the ability to actually drive leads directly from a video, whether that includes email, name, phone number, and zip code. And on top of that, we've actually introduced a new format for our TrueView or YouTube ads, where it makes it a lot more engaging. The call to actions are a lot more sophisticated. And again, you've got a narrative and an audience that you're able to really zero in on to make sure that you're hyper-targeted. So I'd say, just to kind of wrap it up, we want to work with you to show you how, again, across platform, but specifically with the new YouTube integration, how you can reach the right audience with the right bid, with the right asset, and now on YouTube and through video to drive results.
Great. Thank you, Alex, for that great information on YouTube. I'm really excited to see where everything goes in 2019, and been testing out a lot of these tactics with our clients. So really looking forward to being able to share results with you guys over this next year too. So just kind of to recap, thinking about some new and next action items as you think through planning for 2019. Because I know we reviewed a lot of content and it's probably a little overwhelming knowing where to start. We suggest starting with just listening, getting back to the basics and being authentic. So sitting down with your students or key audiences to really understand who they are, what their goals are, and how to maybe activate those voices throughout your community. So leveraging them to kind of really drive that content that you can be sharing on a lot of these channels. And then to really look and assess back what has been working and what hasn't been working. Looking at the channels and strategies you're implementing, your creative and messaging to see what truly is getting engagement and where maybe you need to pivot. Then looking really at exploring, so really evaluating and testing some of those new channels. Like we mentioned, we don't want to go off and test everything, but really always emphasizing that maybe saving some room in your budget to explore some of those new channels. There's going to be things that are channels continue to be introduced into the marketplace, and it's great to be an early adapter based on if you think it's a right fit for your target audience. And don't be afraid to pivot. I think something that we continue to learn throughout our work with different higher education clients is not every strategy works for everyone. We could have the same exact program, but maybe we're thinking about opposite sides of the country, and we really do see some of those changes and those differentiators. So really being kind of on the forefront of looking at that data and not being afraid to pivot if needed. And then really taking that time to measure, monitor, and analyze your performance. So I think the best way to do that is really thinking through how you can aggregate all of your data into one place and really thinking about those KPIs that matter. I think if you're able to really holistically look at performance from both kind of initial awareness all the way through end enrollment, it really gives you the ability to assess ROI and continue to make adjustments to make sure that you're always getting the most bang for your buck when it comes to digital marketing. So with that, we'd love to kind of think through or kind of look at the different questions we've got so far. So I'm going to pull those up really quick. So looking at the first question. What was the name of the free tool for performance dashboards and where can you access that? So I know that we have answered some of these throughout chat, but so the tool we were talking to is Data Studio, which is a Google product. It's been in beta for quite a while, but recently came out of beta. And I think you can just access that by going to datastudio.google.com. And then it's very well synced up to all of the Google marketing products.
Looks like the next question on here is a Google question. How is Google preparing for AR and VR marketing? Dave, I think that's a great question. That's an area that truthfully we are still in the elementary phases for. I'm not sure if you're aware, Google has a VR platform now called Google Daydream, which is really just starting to pivot its way into the market. And I think you'll see a lot of the tech giants are again, getting into that space just because it's definitely an avenue worth exploring and one with huge opportunity. When we talk about the marketing capabilities and where that comes into play, I wouldn't say it's so much on the paid search side of things. I think it's really about understanding how to craft a narrative. I don't know if you've seen on YouTube, and I think Facebook has this as well now. You can take video footage in 360 view, right? So understanding how you as a school can start to adapt towards this millennial and Gen Xer generation to prepare some of your content, to prepare some of your narratives. 360 is the first step. I'd say moving forward, as we get into, again, Daydream and some of those platforms, and we start to get a little bit more comfortable with what's working and what the messaging should be, we'll be able to speak to that a little bit more specifically. But I'd say as a high level, just to wrap up, it's really about understanding how you can make a splash with some of your kind of creative messaging to take advantage of that new trend.
Great, thank you, Alex. Another question for you. Would you mind elaborating on voice search best practices? Specifically, how should we optimize for both organic and then also paid?
Yeah, I hate to go back to this answer. I think it's something that we again, as Google, are still learning to understand. And whether it's through Google Assistant, through Google Home, the connected home, essentially, we've seen a plethora of searches. You would think that Google.com and the way that people are typing is unpredictable, but the way that users are searching through voice search has become very unpredictable, but extremely interesting to understand. So when we talk about how are you going to optimize for organic and paid voice search, I'd say a lot of it, and something that we've actually been working with Converge on and seeing through some of their clients' accounts, is looking through the search terms. You start to understand where the trend is going and how people are, again, searching in conjunction with voice search. So looking through those search terms and starting to pick up on trends, zeroing in on those specific queries as well, will help you get a competitive advantage over your over your competitors, because they're not necessarily looking at these search terms and they're not necessarily thinking ahead to what voice search might be. And just to kind of wrap this piece up, I think on the voice search component of things, it is also extremely important, for the next, I'd say in 1 to 2 years, connected home and connected apps are going to be extremely important. So thinking about a strategy about how you can build these apps to really engage with those users on these different platforms.
Great, thank you. I think we'll do 1 or 2 more, and then definitely want to make sure we wrap up on time. So one other question is, can you share some best practices of short snippet videos for newsfeed, assuming the first 3 seconds have no sound? Also, do you recommend text overlay for all short snippets? So I'll take that one. I think the best approach is really thinking through, what we always suggest is thinking through the video assets that you currently have, because we know that video production is hard. And I think we are seeing a trend where less professional video is okay. I think more okay on other channels, or some channels rather than others. But do think, yeah, the first 3 seconds having no sound, typically it's probably a good idea to have an intro sound where it's not something part of the message that a user could potentially miss. And definitely recommend text overlay for all short videos, because a lot of users are viewing videos without sound still. So I would say some best practices: always start with what you do have in stock. And if you have good resources on staff to help you with the text overlay, that can be great. There's also some free tools out there. I know Snapchat has a tool where they'll help you kind of edit. I think it's called Snap Publisher for Snapchat, but there are some tools out there that can help you kind of convert your existing videos to vertical. I think if you do have the resources, it's always great to think through that vertical format to start, because I think it'll make it easier for shooting and formatting. But those would be some initial recommendations there. And then we'll take one more question. Alex, you talked a bit about full funnel YouTube strategies. Do you have any examples of how this has worked for higher ed? I can start off with one specific example, and then Alex, feel free to elaborate on this. Yep. So with our work with a business school, we're leveraging student stories, both kind of that short format to get in front of audiences who are both kind of engaging with content related to some specific concentrations, but then also who are I would say have behaviors with search and browsing related to going back to school, specifically around MBA. So getting in front of those short snippets, but then also leveraging the longer videos throughout the decision-making process. I don't have all the data in front of me to kind of elaborate on specifics, but have seen some great engagement with kind of thinking through a strategy on how you leverage those short snippets of information versus those longer form videos that I know a lot of our clients have developed in the past.
Yeah, and just to elaborate on it, I guess a little teaser for Converge 2019, but I'll be getting a little bit more into the, again, case studies specifically about some of the full funnel YouTube strategies that we've seen work. Honestly, it's been pretty interesting. It's worked across the board, whether it be for online universities or for offline universities. And we actually just commissioned a research study late this year, so for the second half of 2018, that talks about best practices of video, but how video moves the needle across different stages of a user's application process. And again, the different messaging and creatives that you'll want to send out there based on where the user is. So again, when we talk high level, and we can send out some case studies that we have externally after this as well, but I'd start to think about, again, understanding how you can get to the right user and really thinking about that CMO of McDonald's quote about not just throwing things out there high level, but being able now to target users at every single stage of the funnel very specifically, and how you can have that content and emotive content to reach them wherever they are in that decision-making process.
Great. Yeah, so I want to thank everyone for their time. Just a reminder, Alex just mentioned this before, we do have our conference coming up, and Alex will be presenting with us both on exploring YouTube further, but really honing in on that unreachable audience. We do have a promotion here to save $100 throughout kind of the end of this month. So yeah, we'll be in Atlanta mid-February to present, and we're really excited for the tracks that we have lined up. So I encourage you guys to take a look at our website to explore that more, and be happy to answer any questions about that. And that's it. So thank you guys so much again for attending. Again, we'll be following up with the recording, and if there's any additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to Alex or myself. We'll send out our contact information as well.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great day.